So all the undergarments are complete with the exception of maybe a bustle, but we'll see if we need it. I'm hoping I won't need one because the idea of putting more stuff around my waist is not exciting to me at the moment, but it's time to finally start working on the dress. I have some options. I could drape a pattern. It would probably be quicker to drape a pattern, but that involves standing up. So what we're going to do instead is I'm using this book. This is Creating Historical Clothes by Elizabeth Friendship. I really like this book. If you are familiar with flat pattern cutting, sort of in the style of the Closet Historian, this is a pattern cutting book for historical styles. So it tells you how to take a bodice block and move the seams around and everything so that you get all sorts of things from the 1500s to the 1900s. It's quite generic, so it's not got every style you're going to want, and annoyingly it does end at like the end of the 19th century, so there's no Edwardian styles in here. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draft a basic block. See, I've got nerve pain now. My shoulder blade is tingling from wearing this stupid thing. But yeah, I'm going to draft their basic bodice block, and then I am going to alter it to be, what do they call it? It's like bodice with dropped shoulder and shortened back neckline. It's page 190. If you do have a copy of this book, there'll be a link in the description if you want one. So basically you shorten the neckline and you drop the shoulder and you've got an 1840s bodice. I started by taking all the measurements I would need to draft the pattern over all my undergarments. See, that's why I was so desperate to get all the underwear made. I did the usual bust, waist and hips in both centimetres and inches because I couldn't remember which system this author used. But to draft a pattern you always need some more specific ones, and these depend on the instructions you are using. I needed a measurement from armpit to armpit across the front and from bust apex to bust apex, also known as nipple to nipple. There were a few more like neck to shoulder and bicep to draft the sleeve. Measuring nape to waist on your own back can be a pain, but I find having one of these retractable tape measures helps because it acts a bit like a plumb line to keep the tape measure straight. So I've got my paper, my ruler, my pencil, what do Americans call this? Eraser. So she recommends here, Elizabeth, use the measurement charts on pages 10 to 11. So they're telling you to sort of find your ready to wear size, but naturally I don't match any of their sizes. I'm like, at some measurements I'm a 12, some I'm a 16, some I'm a 14. So we'll just wing it, I think. So sheet of paper, half bust measurement, measurement 1 plus 1 inch, times nape to waist measurement plus 5 inches. Nape to waist measurement, which for me was 41. Oh, that's good. Half measurement 3. Definitely looking at the wrong thing. That's 7. Okay, so I've drafted the pattern. I haven't finished exactly the pattern as given in the instructions because I don't want it to be just a basic bodice block. I want it to be this 1840s one, and then I'm going to adjust it to be a variation, low neck variation, all that sort of thing. So what I have to do is I have to raise the bust point. So that means I have to re-angle the line of this dart slightly. I can get rid of that line. And then I'm going to follow directions here. I have to shorten the back neck from a measure A to B back neck width minus 1.5 centimetres according to size. Huh? Minus 1.5 to 3 centimetres according to size. What, my size? Or do you give me guidelines? Oh, I'm going to have to take this corset off because my shoulder is tingling. It was at this stage that I began to run into a few more issues with the pattern instructions. I don't know if I just misunderstood them or if there was something missing, but I basically followed my instincts to move the neckline in and the shoulder out and down for a dropped shoulder. Why are you still wearing this corset, Claudia? You could just take it off. I could just take it off, but I am trying to sort of get used to it, season it. I don't know. I'm just trying to hate it a little bit less. The front was also a bit weird, but the front shoulder seam was also extended down and out and then curved outwards. Then we go back to the back and drop it even further and curve that too. The next step was creating the style lines with dart manipulation and turning darts into panels. The instructions got particularly confusing at this point, and I ended up mostly just doing my own thing. I did, however, end up with the pattern being a bit small, so I did a very simple slash and spread in the side pieces to get it to be more like my size. After my struggle with the instructions and the pattern ending up the wrong size, I wasn't feeling particularly confident, so the first toile was made from an old bedsheet. I like to cut my patterns without seam allowance, as I find it makes it much easier to do adjustments that way, but that does mean I have to chalk on all the seam allowances before I can cut anything out. It also gives me the freedom to add uneven seam allowances depending on which bits I'm confident will fit better than others. Here I'm pretty certain I'm more likely to adjust the seam positions, so I add more seam allowance there than I do around the armhole, which I'm pretty certain is in the right place. And then time to cut it out. You know it's a bad day when you need both hands to use the scissors. For a toile, it's really important to transfer all the markings, sewing lines and notches. I find the quickest, most energy efficient way to do this is to use carbon paper and a tracing wheel. I find that if I fold the carbon paper in half so that there is carbon facing out on both sides, I can slide the paper between the layers of my pattern pieces and the tracing wheel will mark both sides at once. It's fainter on one side than the other, but if you use a bright colour like red, it's still visible. With everything marked up, I can sew everything together. As we've got a lot of curved seams here, I used a lot of pins and was careful to match all the balance marks and ease the two curves in as I stitched. I also threw a zip very haphazardly into the centre back seam so that I could get this thing on and off by myself. The clip that holds the microphone in place has snapped and it's become a bloody nightmare, quite honestly. So, bodice mock-up. And actually, I think it's almost fine. It's not fine. There are things that need changing, but it's not drastically out. I took some photographs and some phone footage, so the wrinkles might show up a bit better there, but I'll sort of do a little turn for you, because of course, with it being white on white, it's kind of hard for you to see. I'm very happy with the seam placement. I didn't think I would be, but I've kind of got that 18th century stomacher vibes going on, or 17th century stomacher vibes, which is a bit more like this one is going to be. I've been helping Micah from Engineering Knits with the fitting of her ball gown bodice, and we had a big discussion about where these off the shoulder seams and like neckline is supposed to hit, because I have seen it basically in the fashion plates, you know, they draw them with these very sloping shoulders, so it looks like they're down here. So I was a little bit concerned about my shoulder seams, but I actually think they're going to be okay. But my issue is I have quite narrow shoulders, but they're very straight across. I don't slope at all, so I'm not very fashionable. But so I've got quite a sharp right angle, so it's very difficult for me to get anything to sort of sit on the roll of the shoulder. But the chemise underneath actually made a difference, and it's one of those things about when we talk about appropriate undergarments, we often talk about shapewear, right? But actually, when I tried this on before, just over like a vest top, a camisole, it didn't stay in place. But with the chemise underneath, it does, because it's got like the resistance or whatever of the fabric. So again, appropriate undergarments, not just corsets and hoops and all of that. The one thing I think I am going to change, I like the way it fits over the bust, but I do have a wrinkle here. And they do put padding in them, so I will put padding in mine, but I just do have a little bit, it's just too much excess really. So conveniently, it forms itself into a dart that goes right to the bust point. So I'm just going to do some basic dart manipulation, pin a dart in, pivot it out into this seam. You can see I've got some wrinkling here under the bust. And I did contemplate whether I wanted to alter this seam, but I have so little wiggle room at the front here. And also, as you know, my prominent ribs make things difficult. And then of course I remembered you're supposed to bone the fronts of these bodices, and as well it will have a peplum and a skirt hanging off it, maybe not a skirt hanging off it, it depends. I kind of want to make this dress a little bit like I did with Little Dorrit. I want to make it modular so I can swap bits in and out if I need to. I can put you know, a different bodice, a day, an evening bodice, and mix and match and all those sorts of things. But at this period, they do tend to be attached rather than separate skirts and bodices. They tend to be actual dresses. So I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of sort of theatre magic rigging to get what I want to happen. I haven't shaped this side seam, it's just curved, and I think I actually need to fisheye it, and it needs to flare out more at the hip, which I hadn't anticipated because I've got quite a prominent spring now with my old set of stays on. So this side seam needs to open up more and allow more room for the hips, and then everything will hopefully sit a bit neater. Something funny, can you see that wrinkle there? I often get wrinkles there, but there's something funny happening with the armhole of this section, and it's not just because I haven't snipped it, I don't think. I think it's coming too high up too quickly. I can kind of feel the flesh of my arm there that it's straining against, and it's sort of, at first I thought maybe it's too long in that section, but I don't think it is. I think it's just too tight, and that's what's causing that wrinkling. And I could also potentially put a bone in the back if I want to. Don't know if I want to, but like, because you can see if I pull it down, I'm still getting creasing there. And I think it's just because of the tightness. And also you can kind of, like in the armpit there, yeah, it's too tight. So I need more room there. I'm quite happy with the neckline. It's coming to a V, which is making it a bit Sleeping Beauty. It's making it a bit Sleeping Beauty, and I don't want that. I want mine to be rounder. And I think that's just because I free-handed that curve in and I did it a kind of a shitty job. So I'm just going to round that out. I mean, I do quite like that little V. I think it's quite flattering with my my collarbones, but I'll chalk something else in and see how I feel. Also, the bottom edge is too short. It needs to be longer. And also, I appreciate white on white, you can't see anything. But this moment here, for me, is too dramatic. I want a softer curve there. You can see here it's riding up because it's too tight, so it just needs to be let out a little bit from the waistline down. And I want this to sort of come more in a slightly less dramatic point. It's probably with the seam allowance where it is, it's probably the length I want, but it's a very kind of concave shape and I want a bit of a straighter line. I think I need to look at my inspiration image again. Yeah, I want mine a bit straighter. And then I have to drape the peplum pieces, and I have this applied faux sort of stomacher thing to faff about with. I haven't done anything for sleeves yet, so I need to draft a sleeve pattern. It's inspiration I'm using is not a gathered sleeve, it's just a straight sleeve. So that's less forgiving. I'm not working on that until I've corrected the shape of the armhole. But as far as first mock-ups go, to say how shittily I drafted that pattern as well, so that it was like 2 inches too small and I just chopped a bit in. Sometimes I forget I'm quite good at this. So I've just looked at the bodice of my inspiration dress again. This is one of the benefits of making something from, or using something from the John Bright collection as inspiration. Again, there'll be a link to in the description to what I'm talking about, because I will not be able to license these images for this video. The benefit of having all these high-res images that you can zoom in is you get really excellent construction details. And so I was just looking at how the sort of fake stomacher bit is, or like the more like what are those called, robings. I was just looking at how those are done on this dress, and I've just realized that I've completely cut the bodice wrong. I had assumed that the line I was looking at here was a seam, but I don't think this bodice is shaped with seams at all. I've just noticed there's an extra seam line, or possibly a dart, at the centre front waist, and then this panel is just applied on top because it's cut on the bias, so I can see sort of the grain is different. So that leaves me with a dilemma. Do I want to change the construction of my bodice? I don't think so, but that does make installing this panel a lot easier because I can just cut it and pin it on and drape it on, you know. Also, it looks like the sleeves are cut on the bias, joy, and the peplum pieces are too. And goodness knows what I'm going to do for the trim. I might have to do like rouleau trim, because I doubt I'm going to get anything to match well enough. And I don't know what I've decided for my little like toggles down the front either. Don't know what I'm going to do about those. I mean, covered buttons, I need to do some more research. To be honest, I do quite like the simplicity of just having a completely plain bodice. I'm a really unfussy sort of person. Well, we'll see. Right, what I want to do is pin in roughly how much I want to take out of this armhole and sort of where I want to take it out. I think it needs to really be there. Yep, so I think I'm going to do this alteration first, then shape the side seams. So, the plan for my pattern pieces. So I've pinched out a dart here into the armhole. on this pattern piece. So I'm going to, this is the bust point, I'm going to do some basic dart manipulation, pin in that dart, pivot it out, and it will essentially open up into this seam more. This back pattern piece, you can see here, these creased drag lines here, it needs to, this pattern piece actually I think needs to be a touch wider through here. So that's this pattern piece. It needs just a bit more width in this seam. And then I'm, like I say, I'm going to fisheye it ever so slightly, flare it out more at the bottom, and take it in just a touch, probably like not even a centimetre, just to sort of naturally, this is just a straight line. And I've put on a corset which is hugging completely to my figure, which is not going to create a solid straight line. So I think just softening that line should do the trick. Everything needs to be longer, at least to the seam allowance, but also this curve here, you can see that crease there, it's too tight, so it needs to be wider at this point. And this curve here, I need to round out a bit because it's a bit too pointed, and I want a sort of more gradual kind of diagonal line there. So I'll probably need more width in this seam as a result, and at the bottom of this seam. I don't think I'll be able to reuse that toile, but that's all right. But what I think I'm going to do is actually trace off a whole new pattern because I need to add length. Oh, the other thing I want to do is, you see how this comes to a point? I just want to hollow it out just a touch there so that it's not quite as pointy at the front. But I do think I wanted the front point just a touch higher. So maybe it'll be more like I add a bit and fill it in. So I think let's start with the easy ones, the front and the back, because there's not too many alterations to those, just the length. Yeah, I'll see you in a bit, I guess. Of course, one of the things I hadn't thought about as I was tracing this off is that if I want this to remain the same width at the bottom here, which I do, if I make it longer, if I carry this line on, it's going to come to a point. So I need to probably reset that line. So I want it to be at least 1.5 centimetres. Let's go 2 centimetres actually for good luck. We'll do that. But I also was just considering the fact that actually it probably needs to flare out again rather than come straight down. It probably needs to be a touch wider there. So it should be more like that as a curve. Where's Nora War? Let's have a look at the originals and see what they do. Yeah, they do flare out at the centre back. This one is a ball gown bodice and it flares out at the centre back. So yeah, just a touch. So yeah, let's have a look at this one. I'm going to have to pin this one in place. I did feel that maybe the top edge of this was a touch wide, as in here. So I might just come in ever so slightly because I want this cut on the fold. So I could shape the centre front seam, but because I want it on the fold, it's not going to happen. Let's trace it off as it is for now. So that's the waistline, that's the bust point. So let's just go for like 0.5 centimetre maybe. Yeah, I think that will be okay because it's going to really tilt out, isn't it? So again, maybe let's just shave just a fraction off this piece. And then it was just the length really, wasn't it? So I definitely wanted it at least 0.5 centimetre, like 1.5 centimetres longer. So I think let's actually go for 2 centimetres. And I want it 2 centimetres longer here as well. But what I need to do really, yeah, I'm just going to leave the excess paper here and then do it later. For the dart into the armhole, I penciled in where I had pinned the dart in place. Next, I deconstructed the mock-up and pinned the original pattern piece back onto it to line everything up as best I could. I then pinwheeled over the pencil marks to transfer the markings to the paper pattern. I could then line that pattern piece up with my new tracing and mark where those pinwheel marks were. I then pivoted out the dart fullness and drew in the new position of the neckline and armhole. This is exactly the same as the slashing technique, it just skips the cutting and sticking things back together part. I can even check how accurate it is by folding the dart out and then comparing the shape of the pattern piece to my new outline. It was then time to make toile number 2 using all these new pattern pieces. Right, so again, less than ideal setup because I don't have any space to show you this, but this is mock-up number 2, and while I'm still getting some creasing and pooling there, I'm going to put some padding in here, some cotton wadding, which is perfectly historically accurate, and I reckon that will sort that out. The issue I have now is that this armhole is too small, and even just, can you see? It's ripped as I've been like pottering about, getting the camera ready and everything here. So this distance here needs to be longer, and I think that means I'll have to really scoop out the front here. I'm going to look at some historical examples and see what they do. But apart from that, I'll have to move further away. The only other alteration I've made is to this bottom edge, and I don't know if you can see that, yeah, I ripped the fabric there. So what I've done is I let out both seams here, and I didn't need to, I only needed to let out one side because I ended up with, I don't know if you can see on this diagonal line, this panel now flares out and I want it to be completely straight. So I sort of just left the seam allowance pointing under and folded it until this panel was in a straight line, and that will be my new sewing line there. I've penciled it in, not that you can see because of the lighting, but also I've penciled in here, again, where it's ripped, approximately where I think I want my new armhole to go. I might even have to hollow it out more there. But that's the thing with these tight off the shoulder styles, it's always going to be restrictive. But the neckline, the new length I'm happy with. At the back, which I can't really see. Maybe you can see better. There's something funny happening here. One panel is longer than the other. I think I just need to chew that up because I'm happy with the length of this panel. So I need to make these few tweaks to the pattern pieces and to this mock-up. I'm going to keep using this mock-up. I need to draft a sleeve and the peplum bits and the applied robing. It's like an applied sort of decoration, which is sort of an imitation of 18th century style stomacher robings. I think this is pretty darn good, actually. And to say we only needed 2 mock-ups for this sort of thing, I thought I would need a lot more. But today is not a good day for pain, so I am going to take all this crap off my body and put my comfy clothes back on and start working on some of those things. Did I tell you what they were? I can't remember. So do all the other tweaks on this, draft a sleeve and mock up the sleeve, and also the peplum bits for the bottom and the applied robing bit. So you know how sometimes when you're making something, things just inexplicably go your way? Look at this sleeve. I can't believe it. This armhole and sleeve adjustment, which I thought was going to be really, really like sketchy, shaky, don't know what I mean. I thought it was going to be bad. It's actually fine. It's perfect. It fits, I can move. It's not sitting perfectly on the roll of my shoulder, but oh well. It's a touch wide. It needs to taper in more at the bottom, but it's fine. And literally, do you know, I literally looked at a diagram in Nora War, sort of went, meh, that'll do. And it's worked. I mean, I was so nervous about this. I was considering changing the design to be gathered sleeve, like to mimic my chemise, because I like the way these two look together. And I also was like, gathered sleeves are a lot easier to set in than straight cut sleeves. And I was like, well, I'll try it. First time. Brilliant. It's also cut on the bias. Maybe that helped. I don't know. But when I zoomed in on the pictures of my inspiration dress, the sleeves were cut on the bias, as are like the tabs and the robing. So I'll be cutting those on the bias as well. But this has gone so successfully, I think I might call it a day, just because I don't want to jinx it. I don't know. Amazing. Huh. I think we are finally there. I'm really pleased with the fit. I'm really pleased with how all the lines are hitting. Naturally, the mannequin is not quite the same size as me, so it's not as smooth on her as it is on me, particularly around the waist and things. I've also mocked up the decoration, which I must confess, when I first did it, I don't like it. Put a pin in that so I can gesticulate wildly with my hands. It does look like my inspiration dress, so there's that. It also, however, looks very 18th century, which, as you know, I don't like. I think part of the issue is I really love the sort of very simplistic lines of the 1840s, and I've now just covered it in ruffles. and it doesn't appeal to my natural tastes, I suppose. So I have considered sacking all this off and just making a Bertha, or just having a plain dress, because that is also an option. They did have completely plain dresses. I have requested some second opinions from my mum and various sewing and knitting friends to see what they think, and they all think, my mum went, oh, it's really pretty. And I do seem to remember having a similar sort of crisis when I made Little Dorrit, and I was like, oh my God, it looks awful. So I don't know whether it's partly like when you work on any long-term project and you just sort of are sick of looking at it. I don't know whether I'm going through that phase or whether I really don't want to do this. I'm looking at it again and I kind of want to make a Bertha. Oh no, why am I like this? I think I'm going to make a Bertha instead. I just prefer them, and I also love, there's some with some like knitted lace on, or crocheted lace, and I'd love to be able to do that, to add some knitted trim. Have I got time to knit trim? I have a month. Maybe I could just do a little bit down the front. Well, looks like I have to figure out how to make a Bertha now.